Single dad finds injured alien Empress in storm, unaware she'll make daughter's dream fly. The rain poured relentlessly over the small coastal town, washing the streets in silver streams that reflected the dull glow of street lamps. Mark tightened his jacket around himself and hurried along the cracked sidewalk, careful to avoid puddles that threatened to soak his shoes. He had been working late at the repair shop again, the kind of place where hands got dirty and paychecks came slowly, but he had no choice. With Leela waiting for him at home, he couldn't afford to waste any time. Leela's little world was still bright and warm despite the storm outside. At 8 years old, she had a way of seeing magic in everything. Her small room was full of drawings of faraway planets, spaceships, and creatures with wings like sunlight. Tonight, she had been talking excitedly about building a spaceship out of cardboard, imagining herself flying across the stars. Mark had listened with a tired smile, nodding along while her energy made his own weariness seem heavier. By the time he reached the cliffs on the edge of town, the wind was almost violent, tugging at his jacket and ruffling his hair. He wasn't sure why he had walked this far in the storm. Maybe it was habit, maybe it was the quiet call of the ocean, but then he saw something that made him freeze in place. A shape lay motionless against the rocks, half hidden by the spray of the waves. Mark squinted through the rain. At first, he thought it was a stranded animal, perhaps a dog or a deer swept down by the storm. But as he drew closer, he realized it was not an animal. The figure was humanoid, but unlike anything he had ever seen. The skin shimmered faintly in the rain, almost silver in color, and the hair flowed like liquid gold. Her eyes were closed, but he could sense the presence of someone alive, fragile, and in need of help. He knelt beside her, unsure what to do. "Hey, are you okay?" he shouted over the wind. There was no answer. He felt along her arm and found warmth there, a weak pulse that reassured him she was alive. The storm had not given him much choice. Gently, he wrapped his jacket around her and lifted her as carefully as he could. Carrying her through the slippery rocks was a challenge, but he managed to get her back to his small car. The vehicle was cramped, not ideal for moving someone who looked so fragile, but it would have to do. He drove slowly, the rain pounding on the roof, his mind racing. Who was she? And why was she here alone on a stormy night? At home, Leela was still awake, pacing in her room when she heard the car pull into the driveway. "Daddy," she called. Mark opened the door, carrying the stranger gently. I found someone," he said, voice tight with worry. "She's hurt. We need to help her." Leela's eyes widened, taking in the shimmering figure in her father's arms. "She's beautiful," she whispered, stepping closer. There was a spark of curiosity in her gaze, an innocent excitement that made Mark feel slightly better despite the storm raging outside. They laid her on the couch, and Mark wrapped her in blankets while Leela fetched towels to dry her hair. The stranger stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open to reveal irises that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Leela gasped softly, captivated by the alien's appearance. "Hello," Mark said cautiously, unsure what words would be safe. The stranger's voice was soft, melodic, and unlike any language he knew. Yet, when she looked at Leela, there was a gentle understanding in her gaze, as if she could sense the child's thoughts without words. Leela knelt beside the stranger. "Are you hurt?" she asked. The alien inclined her head slightly, and with a small motion of her hand, a faint light moved from her palm to Leela's drawings on the floor. The sketches shimmered for a brief moment, as if acknowledging the touch. Leela's eyes grew wide. "Daddy, look," she said excitedly. Mark looked bewildered, but the drawings returned to normal quickly, leaving only the faint glow of magic in the air. He frowned. He didn't understand what he was seeing, but the instinct to protect the stranger overrode any fear. For the rest of the night, they watched over her. Mark made tea and tried to ask questions, but the alien only responded with quiet gestures, her language a mystery. Yet there was something in the way she looked at Leela, a warmth, a recognition, almost like she had known the girl's dreams before she had spoken them aloud. As the storm raged outside, the house seemed strangely calm. Leela fell asleep beside the stranger on the couch, her hand lightly touching the alien's arm. Mark watched them both, a mix of awe and apprehension filling him. He had never seen anything like this, never imagined something so extraordinary could happen in his ordinary life. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world outside washed clean and glistening in the soft morning light. Mark had gone to get breakfast while Leela stayed beside the stranger, humming softly as she carefully set her drawings around her like a gallery. The alien's eyes followed every movement, and when Leela looked up, she smiled faintly. "Do you understand what she's saying?" Leela asked, tilting her head. Mark shook his head. I think she understands you," he said slowly, "but I don't think she speaks our language." Leela nodded seriously. "She's like a guardian or something. Maybe she came here to help me." Mark chuckled nervously, brushing his daughter's hair back. "Maybe. Or maybe she just needs our help." He didn't say the part that raced in his mind. The thought that this stranger could be more than she appeared, that the universe might suddenly feel larger, stranger, and more dangerous than they could imagine. Over the next few days, the stranger began to recover. She was still weak, but she could move and observe the world around her. Leela took every opportunity to show her the things she loved, her toys, her books, her sketches of spaceships. The alien responded with curiosity, touching each drawing with a light that seemed to make them glow faintly, as though acknowledging Leela's imagination. Mark watched these moments carefully. Something about the stranger was changing their home, their ordinary life. Leela seemed brighter, more confident, as if her dreams were being encouraged in ways Mark could not explain. He caught himself wondering what she truly was, where she had come from, and why she had chosen to appear in their little town, in their home, at exactly this time. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep reds and golds, the alien finally spoke in words that Mark could almost understand. "Child dreams," she whispered, voice like music, soft and melodic. Leela tilted her head, listening intently, and for a moment it seemed as if the stranger had recognized something that only children could see, a truth hidden in imagination, courage, and hope. Mark felt a shiver run down his spine. He didn't understand the meaning yet, but he knew their lives were about to change. Something extraordinary had entered their world, and he had no choice but to follow along, to protect it, and perhaps to discover the possibilities that lay beyond the ordinary. As night fell and the stars began to appear, tiny points of light scattered across the sky, Mark realized that for the first time in a long time, the universe didn't feel so distant. Maybe, just maybe, the stranger had brought a piece of it here, not to take, but to share. And in Leela's wide eyes, shining with wonder, Mark understood that their ordinary life was on the edge of something remarkable, something that could make dreams fly far beyond the boundaries of their little coastal town. He sat quietly in the dim light, listening to the rhythmic breathing of the two beings in his home, his daughter and the stranger who had appeared in the storm. The wind had calmed outside, but inside something new had begun, something fragile, wondrous, and full of promise. Mark didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time he felt a sense of awe. The world was no longer just small and ordinary. It was big, full of possibilities, and now, somehow, connected to something far beyond his understanding. And in that quiet, magical moment, he realized that the storm had not only brought an injured stranger, it had brought a spark that could change everything. The days after the storm felt strangely alive. The sun shone brightly over the coastal town, making the wet streets sparkle as if the world had been freshly painted. Leela had taken to spending every free moment with the stranger, who she had quietly named Cerelia, though she didn't know if that was her real name. The alien's presence was gentle, yet full of quiet power, and Mark could sense that this was no ordinary visitor. Cerelia still remained mostly silent, speaking only in soft words that neither Mark nor Leela fully understood. Yet her gestures, the movements of her hands, and the faint glow that sometimes appeared around her fingertips seemed to carry meaning. Leela, with her wide imagination and innocence, was the only one who seemed to truly understand these subtle signals. She would watch Cerelia with rapt attention, nodding when the alien pointed at her sketches, or holding up her toys as if to show her creations were worthy of approval. Mark tried to return to his normal life, but it was impossible. Every time he glanced at Cerelia, he felt the weight of questions he could not answer pressing down on him. Where had she come from? Why had she appeared here during a storm in his small town? And most importantly, what exactly could she do? He had glimpsed moments of something extraordinary, a sketch glowing when touched by her, a small object repairing itself without hands. But he didn't understand the mechanics, and he knew he was treading on something far beyond ordinary life. One afternoon, Mark returned from work to find Leela sitting cross-legged on the floor, a pile of her spaceship drawings spread before her. Cerelia knelt beside her, her eyes following every line and color. There was a calm, almost reverent energy in the room, a quiet hum that Mark could feel in his chest but could not explain. "Daddy, come see," Leela called. "She's showing me something." Mark crouched down beside them. Cerelia extended a hand over one of Leela's sketches, and the paper shimmered slightly. Slowly, as if responding to the child's imagination, the lines of the spaceship lifted off the page and hovered a few inches above it, forming a faint three-dimensional shape made of glowing light. Leela's eyes sparkled with delight. "Can she really do that?" Mark whispered, awestruck. Leela nodded furiously. "She's magic, Daddy," she said. "She said I can make it fly too if I really believe." Mark didn't know what to say. He wanted to caution her, to remind her that not everything she imagined could become real. But watching Leela's wide eyes and the wonder in Cerelia's gaze, he found himself smiling. Perhaps some things were meant to be believed in before they could be explained. Over the next few days, Leela's imagination seemed to grow stronger. She spent hours experimenting with sketches, toys, and small models, all of which responded in subtle ways to Cerelia's presence. A paper rocket she had folded the day before suddenly lifted from her desk, floating in gentle loops above her head. Mark blinked and rubbed his eyes, thinking he was imagining things, but Leela laughed with pure joy, chasing it with her hands. "This is amazing," she said breathlessly. "I can really make it fly." Mark felt a strange mixture of fear and pride. Something extraordinary was happening, something that could not be contained in the small walls of their house. He had always tried to protect Leela, to give her a safe and ordinary childhood, but now the ordinary seemed almost impossible. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned shades of purple and gold, there was a sudden knock at the door. Mark froze. Visitors were rare in this weather, and his instincts told him to be cautious. Leela had been showing Cerelia her new sketches, her fingers trembling with excitement, when Mark cautiously opened the door. Standing there were two figures, tall and clad in dark suits that seemed to absorb the light. Their faces were stern, and their eyes held a cold calculation that made Mark's stomach tight. "Good evening," one said, his voice calm but firm. "We are looking for a woman." "She may be injured. Have you seen her?" Mark's mind raced. He knew he had to protect Cerelia. "I don't know who you mean," he said carefully. "No one came here but us." The man's gaze swept over the house, lingering briefly on Leela before returning to Mark. "We mean no harm to the child," he said smoothly. "We only wish to speak to the visitor. We are concerned for her safety." Mark didn't trust them. Something about their manner was too controlled, too deliberate. "I said I don't know anyone," he repeated, his voice firmer now. "Please leave." The two men exchanged a quick glance, then nodded. "As you wish," the taller one said, stepping back. "But know that this is not the last time you will hear from us. She is important." As soon as the door closed, Mark felt a chill run down his spine. He shut the door and locked it, checking the windows. "Who were they?" Leela asked, her voice small and curious. "I don't know," Mark admitted, "but we need to be careful. I think they are after Cerelia." Leela looked at Cerelia, who was kneeling quietly on the floor, her glowing eyes fixed on Leela's sketches. She seemed unafraid, calm, as if she had expected these visitors. Leela reached out and held her hand. "It's okay," she whispered. "They can't hurt us." Mark felt a surge of pride at his daughter's bravery, but also a gnawing worry. He had no idea what was coming, and yet he could feel that the ordinary rules of their world no longer applied. The following days were tense. Mark kept a careful watch, making sure the windows were secure and the doors were locked. But life at home continued in small, extraordinary ways. Leela's sketches became more detailed, her imagination more vivid. Cerelia would guide her hands lightly, showing her how to shape the glowing forms that floated above the papers. Objects would levitate briefly, shimmer, or repair themselves in small ways, and Mark would watch silently, trying to make sense of the impossible. One night, as Mark slept on the couch to stay near Leela, he woke to a faint glow in the room. Cerelia was hovering slightly above the floor, her body surrounded by a soft, golden light. Leela was asleep, a pencil still clutched in her small hand. The alien's gaze was fixed on her, eyes shimmering with quiet wonder. Mark watched, speechless. He realized then that Leela's imagination was not just a game, not just dreams on paper. It was something real, something that responded to Cerelia's presence. And somehow the alien had chosen his daughter for a reason he could not yet understand. The next morning, Leela woke excitedly. "Daddy, I saw it," she said. I dreamed about a spaceship and it moved. It really moved. Mark frowned. Moved? How? She pointed to her sketches, which were now slightly raised above the floor, glowing faintly. Look, I just imagined it and it flew. Mark felt a mix of awe and disbelief. This is incredible, he said, but we need to be careful. People might notice. Leela shook her head. No one can stop it, not even the men at the door. They can't touch this. It's ours. Mark nodded slowly, realizing that she was right. Whatever this power was, it was connected to Leela's imagination and Ceralia's guidance. Ordinary threats could not reach it, and somehow he felt a growing sense of hope. If a child's dreams could have this effect, then the world, perhaps even the galaxy, was larger and more full of possibilities than he had ever imagined. Days turned into a week, and the bond between Leela and Ceralia grew stronger. Leela began to speak in her own small, innocent way about exploring space, traveling to new worlds, and meeting strange creatures. Ceralia would respond with gestures, faint glows, or words that Leela somehow understood. Mark could see that the alien's influence was awakening something in his daughter, confidence, curiosity, and a belief in the impossible. But not all was calm. One evening, as the family prepared for dinner, a strange sound came from the sky. Mark ran outside and saw a small, sleek craft hovering above the house, scanning with a pale blue light. He grabbed Leela and pulled her inside, heart pounding. Ceralia rose from her seat, calm and steady, and raised her hand toward the craft. The light from her palm touched the hovering scanner, and to Mark's amazement, the craft immediately withdrew and vanished into the sky. Leela's eyes were wide. Did she do that? Mark swallowed hard. I think she did, he said. She's protecting us, but Mark, this isn't just about dreams anymore. They know she's here, and we're in the middle of it now. Ceralia knelt beside Leela and touched her forehead lightly. A warmth spread through the girl, and Mark could see a new resolve forming in her eyes. Whatever challenges were coming, she was ready. And with Ceralia's guidance, Mark knew that their ordinary life was about to change forever. As night fell and the stars blinked into existence above the coastal town, Mark realized something he had not expected. The universe was no longer distant or untouchable. It had arrived in his home, in his daughter's dreams, and in the presence of a being who could shape reality itself. And somehow, he understood that the adventure had only just begun. The night was quiet, yet the air seemed charged with something Mark could not name. The stars hung like distant lanterns in the sky, but to him, they now felt close, almost reachable. Leela was asleep on the couch, her sketches scattered around her, glowing faintly in the dim light. Ceralia knelt beside her, hands hovering over the papers, guiding the faint energy that flowed from her. Mark watched silently, heart racing, realizing that what was happening in his living room was far beyond anything ordinary humans had ever seen. Over the next morning, Leela awoke with a sparkle in her eyes. "Daddy, I think I can make it move on my own," she said, pointing at a tiny paper spaceship she had folded herself. Ceralia smiled faintly, the first clear smile Mark had seen from her, and nodded. She stepped back, letting Leela take control. The girl concentrated hard, closing her eyes and stretching her hands over the floating model. Slowly, the spaceship lifted off the floor, spinning gently, and then it shot forward across the room, tracing loops through the air. Mark could not help but laugh, half in disbelief and half in joy. Leela's laugh echoed around the room, pure and free. "This is amazing, Leela," he said, kneeling beside her. I didn't think you could do it on your own." "I'm not alone," she replied, pointing to Ceralia. "She's helping me." Mark nodded, understanding finally what he had been seeing all along. It wasn't just Ceralia doing impossible things or Leela's imagination being childish play. It was a combination. Human creativity combined with something extraordinary, something beyond their world. As the week passed, the small living room became a laboratory of wonder. Leela experimented with flying models, floating objects, and glowing drawings. Every day she learned a little more, and every day she grew bolder. Mark kept a careful watch, protecting her from the outside world, especially now that he knew the mysterious men were still searching. But he also felt a sense of pride. His daughter, ordinary in many ways, was becoming a bridge between worlds. One afternoon, Leela and Ceralia were working on a new experiment, a small model of a starship, intricate and delicate. Ceralia guided her hands, and the model lifted from the paper, hovering steadily in the air. Then, with a soft glow surrounding it, the starship expanded slightly as if it were alive. Leela's eyes grew wide with wonder. "Daddy, it's moving." "Really moving?" she whispered, pointing at the tiny craft that now seemed to glide in the air as though it had engines and wings. Mark watched in awe. "It's incredible, I don't know how it's possible," he said. But even as he spoke, he felt a thrill. This was human ingenuity, curiosity, and imagination at its peak, amplified by something extraordinary. Suddenly, a low hum vibrated through the house. The lights flickered, and a faint ripple ran through the air. Mark instinctively stepped forward, placing a hand on Leela's shoulder. Ceralia's eyes narrowed slightly, and she raised her hands toward the floating starship. Outside, the wind picked up, not from the storm but from the sky itself. A sleek craft descended silently, hovering above the house. Mark's stomach tightened. The men they had returned, but this time it was different. Their vehicle was advanced, alien in design, scanning the house with soft pulses of blue light. "Stay back," Mark whispered, gripping Leela's hand. "Whatever happens, stay close to me." Ceralia stepped forward, calm and composed. She raised her hand toward the intruding craft. A soft golden glow spread from her palm, extending toward the hovering ship. The light pulsed like a heartbeat and the ship shuddered. Then suddenly it lifted higher, drawing back into the sky and disappeared into the distance. Leela's mouth fell open. She did it again," Mark exhaled slowly, still holding his breath. I guess she's protecting us," he said, "but we need to be ready. They will come back." The days after the encounter were tense. Mark made sure the doors were locked, windows reinforced, and food and supplies were ready. Yet in the midst of this, Leela's experiments grew bolder. She began trying to combine her sketches into larger forms, creating imaginary worlds in her living room. Ceralia guided her patiently, teaching her how to shape energy without fear, how to let her imagination guide reality without overreaching. One afternoon, Leela held up a sketch she had drawn of a distant planet with floating islands, glowing waterfalls, and strange creatures flying through the sky. "Can we go there?" she asked. Ceralia's eyes glimmered. "You can," she said softly, "but you must be careful." Imagination is powerful, but it can reach far beyond what you expect. Mark frowned. "Go there, you mean really?" Ceralia nodded. "Your mind can reach it, your heart can follow, but you must believe." Leela's eyes widened, sparkling with excitement. "I want to try." Over the next week, Leela focused on her planet, drawing every detail, every feature she imagined. The small floating models became a miniature map of the world she had created. Slowly, under Ceralia's guidance, the objects began to levitate in a precise arrangement, forming a tiny holographic version of the planet. Mark watched, dumbfounded, as Leela's imagination shaped something real in front of him. But as the holographic planet stabilized, there was a sudden tremor in the air. The wind outside picked up and a faint glow bathed the walls. Mark's heart raced. He looked at Ceralia, who was calm, but her eyes betrayed a hint of concern. Something had sensed the power being used, something beyond Earth. A ripple passed through the holographic planet, and suddenly a soft voice echoed, not in words he could understand, but in feeling. The message was clear. Attention. Unauthorized use of advanced technology detected. Locate and retrieve the subject. Mark's face turned pale. "They're back," he whispered, "and they're not waiting this time." That night, as they prepared for the possibility of another encounter, Mark realized something remarkable. Leela was not afraid. She held her sketches and models close, her small face set with determination. Ceralia knelt beside her, a protective presence, and together they created a plan. If the men returned, they would not just defend, they would surprise them. And when the craft finally returned, descending silently over the house, Mark held his breath. But Leela, guided by Ceralia, stepped forward. She raised her hands, concentrating on her miniature planet. The models lifted, the drawings glowed, and a soft golden light spread from the living room, forming a barrier of energy. The craft faltered, spinning slightly as it tried to penetrate the force. Then, unexpectedly, the holographic planet expanded, projecting outward in a shimmering dome of imagination and energy. The intruder's craft recoiled, unable to pass through the barrier. Mark's heart pounded as he watched his daughter's creation hold them at bay. Leela's laughter rang out, pure and triumphant. "We did it! We're safe!" The intruders withdrew, retreating into the sky. The light faded, and the models gently returned to their places. Mark rushed to Leela, lifting her into his arms. You saved us," he said, voice trembling with awe. Leela grinned. "We saved us together." Mark looked at Ceralia, who nodded faintly. Her eyes shimmered with pride, but there was also a serious warning. Their lives were no longer just ordinary. The universe had noticed them, and their adventure was only beginning. In the quiet aftermath, Mark realized something important. Humanity, its courage, imagination, and resilience, was stronger than he had ever believed. And now, with Leela's dreams guided by Cerelia, they had a chance to touch the stars in a way no one else had imagined. As the night deepened, and the stars twinkled brightly over the coastal town, Mark understood that the ordinary life he had known was gone forever. In its place was a world filled with possibilities, danger, and wonder. And in the center of it all was his daughter, a child with the power to dream worlds into existence, guided by a being from beyond the stars. Mark held Leela close, feeling her small heartbeat against his chest. Somehow, he knew that whatever challenges were coming, whatever dangers awaited, they could face them together. Imagination, courage, and love had created something extraordinary, and they were only beginning to understand the power it held. And in the distance, beyond the sky, he could feel the universe watching, waiting, and perhaps recognizing humanity for the first time. The morning sun poured through the windows, painting the small living room in warm light. Leela sat cross-legged on the floor, her drawings scattered around her like a universe waiting to be discovered. Cerelia hovered slightly above the ground, her eyes soft but focused, as if reading the child's thoughts before she even spoke them. Mark stood nearby, hands trembling slightly, not from fear but from awe. He had never imagined that ordinary paper, pencils, and a child's imagination could hold such power. "Today, we try something new," Cerelia said softly, her melodic voice floating in the air. Leela's eyes widened, and she nodded eagerly. Mark felt a thrill of anticipation. Whatever they were about to attempt, he knew it would change their lives forever. Leela held up a drawing of a vast planet, larger and more detailed than anything she had made before. Floating islands, rivers of glowing light, and forests that seemed alive stretched across the page. She had imagined creatures with wings like ribbons of sunlight and towers that spiraled into the clouds. "Can we really go there?" she whispered, almost afraid to ask. Cerelia smiled faintly. "You already are, your mind is already there, but now your heart must guide it." Mark swallowed hard. How do we do that?" he asked. Cerelia extended her hand toward Leela. A soft, golden glow spread from her fingertips, touching the edges of the floating drawings. The sketches lifted into the air, spinning gently as if the room itself were a small galaxy. Leela reached out, hands trembling with excitement, and touched the forms. A warmth spread through her body, and suddenly the floating planet began to expand, growing larger, forming a shimmering dome that filled the room with golden light. Mark stepped back, shielding his eyes. He felt the air hum with energy, and the small objects that had been floating now arranged themselves into landscapes, rivers, and mountains. Leela's imagination was not just a dream. It was reality, shaped and amplified by Cerelia's presence. "Daddy, look," Leela cried, pointing to the glowing rivers on the floating planet. "I can see it, I can really see it." Mark nodded, unable to speak. The child's joy was infectious, and he felt a rush of pride, but he also knew the danger. The intruders were still out there, searching for Cerelia, and now they could sense the power Leela was creating. The first sign of trouble came as a low vibration in the air. The golden dome shimmered, and the temperature shifted slightly. Mark looked up to see the faint outline of a sleek craft hovering above the house. Its surface reflected the light from the floating planet, and he felt the same tension he had felt before. "They're back," he whispered, gripping Leela's hand. Cerelia stepped forward, calm and composed. "This time," she said softly, "we are not hiding. We will show them what humans can do." Mark felt a thrill of fear and pride. For the first time, he realized that this was not just about protection. It was about demonstrating something greater: human ingenuity, courage, and imagination amplified by the extraordinary. Leela's eyes widened as she focused on the floating planet. She closed her eyes, concentrating, and the energy around her pulsed in response. The glowing rivers flowed faster, the islands shifted gently, and the creatures she had drawn moved as if alive. Mark could see the determination in her face. She was no longer a child playing with paper, she was a creator, shaping a world with nothing but her mind and heart. The craft above descended slowly, scanning the golden dome. Mark's pulse quickened. The intruders had not expected this. They had underestimated humans, and now they were witnessing the full power of imagination and courage. "Leela, focus," Cerelia whispered. "Let them see." Show them what humans can do. The child's hands moved over the floating sketches, and the glowing planet expanded outward, forming a barrier of light around the house. The intruder's craft faltered, unable to penetrate the energy. Leela's eyes shone brightly, and her laughter rang through the room, pure and triumphant. Mark stepped forward, watching in awe. The golden dome extended farther, touching the sky above, blending with the stars. He realized that this was more than a defense, it was a statement. Humanity, small and fragile, had a power that even advanced civilizations could not ignore. Imagination, creativity, and courage. The intruders tried to retreat, but the light from Leela's creation followed them, forming shimmering tendrils that seemed to hold them at bay. The craft shuddered, then withdrew into the distance, leaving the night sky calm once again. Leela gasped, breathing heavily, but she smiled. "We did it, we really did it." Mark knelt beside her, holding her close. "Yes, baby, you did it. You all of us did it." Cerelia floated down to them, her eyes glowing softly. "Your heart, your imagination, it is stronger than they imagined. This is what makes humans remarkable. You create, you believe, you never give up." Mark felt tears prick his eyes. He had spent so long trying to protect his daughter from the ordinary dangers of life, but now he realized that she was part of something extraordinary. Humanity was capable of more than survival. It was capable of wonder, courage, and change. Over the next few days, Leela continued to explore her new abilities. With Cerelia's guidance, she shaped more worlds, created landscapes, and even experimented with flying objects. Each creation was a testament to the power of human imagination when combined with guidance, patience, and belief. Mark watched, amazed and humbled. He realized that the universe was no longer distant or unreachable. It had come to him in the form of a child's dreams and the presence of a being from another world. And somehow, he understood that humans were no longer just observers, they were participants. One evening, as the sky turned shades of purple and gold, Cerelia gathered Mark and Leela in the living room. "It is time," she said softly. "I cannot stay on this world forever, but I will leave something for you, something that will allow your dreams to continue beyond Earth." Leela's eyes widened. "Really? What is it?" Cerelia held out a small, glowing device, shaped like a crystal but humming with quiet energy. "This will allow you to carry your imagination further than you ever thought possible. Your dreams can fly, and your heart will guide them." Mark took the device carefully. It pulsed gently in his hands, warm and alive. This is incredible," he whispered. Leela hugged Cerelia tightly. "Thank you, I'll never forget you." Cerelia smiled, a radiant warmth filling the room. "And I will never forget you, child. You have reminded me of the power of hope, courage, and imagination. Keep believing always." The next morning, Cerelia rose into the sky, her golden light blending with the dawn. She hovered briefly above the house, then disappeared into the horizon, leaving Mark and Leela alone but forever changed. Mark looked at his daughter, whose eyes sparkled with excitement and wonder. "Are you ready?" he asked gently. Leela nodded, clutching the crystal device. "Yes, Daddy, I want to see the stars, really see them." Together, they activated the device. The golden light spread from it, enveloping the room. The floating sketches of planets, stars, and creatures expanded outward, forming a small gateway of shimmering energy. Leela's heart raced, and Mark held her hand tightly. They stepped through together, feeling the warmth, the wonder, and the limitless possibilities of the universe stretching before them. As they emerged on the other side, they found themselves in a vast expanse of stars, glowing planets, and swirling nebulae. Leela gasped in delight. We're really here," Mark laughed, holding her close. "Yes, baby, we're really here, and this is just the beginning." Leela reached out, touching a glowing star. It shimmered under her fingertips, responsive to her imagination. She drew her hand back and grinned. "I can create here too, Daddy. I can really make things happen." Mark nodded, filled with pride and awe. He realized that the universe was no longer unreachable or distant. Humanity, through imagination, courage, and belief, had a place here too. And with Leela leading the way, guided by hope and wonder, there was no limit to what they could achieve. The stars stretched endlessly around them, each one a possibility, a dream waiting to be shaped. Leela laughed with joy, creating tiny glowing worlds, flying creatures, and bridges between stars. Mark watched, feeling an overwhelming sense of awe. He realized that their lives, once ordinary and limited to a small coastal town, were now intertwined with the infinite possibilities of the cosmos. And in that moment, Mark understood the truth that Cerelia had shown them all along. Humanity's greatest power was not strength or technology, but imagination, courage, and the willingness to dream beyond limits. As father and daughter floated among the stars, creating, imagining, and exploring, Mark felt hope swell in his heart. The universe was no longer distant. It was theirs to discover, theirs to shape, and theirs to love. And with Leela's dreams leading the way, they had only just begun their journey.